Oh, guys, good, you hear? I am so excited. Guess what? I hope this isn't about your podcast again. Why, did you finally listen to it?
Da-da-da-da, 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 the Gloomy Next Door production. You're listening to BYOTP Radio. Coming up next, the Gloomy Next Door. The Gloomy Next Door podcast.
Dun, 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 dun.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm everybody's friend.
Hello, pups and kittens, and welcome to another fun-filled and informative episode of the Groomer Next Door podcast. I'm your host, Chris Green. Joining us this week from Six Black Dogs Leash Company, we are so fortunate to be able to talk to Penny Baker. She has so many great stories to share with us, and I look so forward to sitting down with her. But before then, let's get into this week's Fact of the Week. Now, in relation to Penny and her number one of three passions that she had to accomplish in life, I thought this was perfect. The Labrador Retriever has been on the AKC's top 10 most popular breeds list for 25 consecutive years, maybe a little bit longer now, longer than any other breed. Thought that was kind of a cool fun fact, and that one is right there for Penny. I knew that she would probably get a lot out of that one. Well, by that sound, Penny is about to enter the podcast studio, so with that said, welcome Penny Baker to the podcast.
Oh, hello. Hold on a sec. Dad, we have a guest on the podcast.
This week on the podcast, I am so happy to be able to sit down with this lady. She's just absolutely got the coolest background. I was enjoying doing my background research on you. It was a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to actually finding out more because I just really need to be educated, I guess. This week we have Penny Baker. She has Six Black Dogs Leash Company, and you deal with obedience, you work at the Wizard of Paws with Debbie Taraka, and you just seem like a very interesting lady. So thank you for being on the podcast.
Oh, well, thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. I'm definitely in the last couple of years I've added to my things that I do with my dogs and outside of that. So it's been an interesting couple of years.
Well, take us back to the origin story. Where we start every episode, we find out, just how did you get to this place? What was the origin story that got you here?
My husband wants to know that too, I think. I don't know. When you're growing up, you always, there's things in your head that you think you might want to do. And I had this really weird thing. I said I always wanted to get a tattoo, a Coach handbag, and a Labrador Retriever. And I managed to do all of that, and then somehow I managed to start collecting all of those things as well. So that's how I got the Labrador. Was first I had, I don't know why, I just kind of had grown up thinking that would be a cool dog to have. We always had dogs growing up, so I was used to having a dog. So when I was able to, I happened to find somebody. I had a friend who had a Labrador, and I said I was looking for a dog because my mixed breed had passed away, and that's how I got my first Labrador, and they seem to just have multiplied.
It does happen.
Adding them.
It's funny, once you get the first, it's kind of like a tattoo. Now, I don't have any tattoos just yet because I had to find the perfect art, and I'm very meticulous. But I'm on the way as soon as I can, get the right place. But I've heard it's the same thing. Once you get one tattoo, it becomes I get another one. Well, same thing goes with having a dog. You get one, you're like, I need another.
Yeah, for sure.
So, now, you're in obedience. Now, there's a vast amount of different things we can go into, but I want to make sure we actually cover the right amount of obedience. Now, are we talking about the generic kind of obedience? Are we talking about sport obedience where there's competition? Exactly what level of obedience do you actually do?
So I've dabbled in a whole bunch of that. The first Labrador I had, I started her doing hunt tests. That's when I started. That was the first thing I ever did with a dog as far as competition-wise. And I had kind of lucked out. I had stayed connected to the breeder who owned and who was training dogs with the father of my dog as well. So I started way back when doing hunt tests, which were very different at the time. Did that for a few years. And unfortunately, the gentleman had passed away, and our little training group sort of fell apart. So I had a dog that was very much a dog that was used to doing things and needed to do things because she was pretty high drive. And that's when I stumbled upon agility. Happened to be talking to somebody. They said, "Oh, you should try agility," and I started agility classes, and I kind of got, if anybody's ever talked to you about agility, it's, you just get sucked into it. Like, you start, and then you can't stop. So I did agility with her, with Sarah, for many years. And so you need obedience, certain type of obedience for both of those types of venues. So that's kind of just basic obedience that's specific to those. They need to be able to sit. They need to be able to stay. They need to be able to come when called. All kind of life skills, but still things that they need to be able to do in the heat of the moment. So I never did anything else with her other than those two particular venues, and then I've dabbled in other things with the other dogs. I actually did fly ball with her also. That was a crazy sport. That one doesn't actually require much obedience.
Now, in the whole realm of hunt test, now, are you the one that actually is the shooter, or you just pretty much have the dog go? Because that interests me by a lot. There's so many things I have questions on that one.
So it depends on what venue you do. I do both AKC hunt test and HRC hunt test, which is the UKC version of that. In AKC tests, in the higher levels, you hold a fake shotgun, but you don't really do anything with it. And it's not a real shotgun, but you are supposed to hold it and act like you're shooting, because the whole concept of a hunt test is that you're out hunting. So you're supposed to kind of act like you're doing that. HRC tests are a whole nother matter, and I've actually become quite entranced with those tests. So not at the beginning level, but at the middle and at the higher level, you actually are shooting. So you're shooting blanks, or poppers are what they call them. They're not extremely loud, but they're pretty loud. And you actually have to handle a shotgun, and your dog. So obedience becomes pretty critical, because you can't be holding onto a leash and holding onto a shotgun at the same time, because even though they're blanks, they can still hurt. So you still have to follow all sorts of gun safety, things like that. And in the higher levels, you're shooting multiple times. You're going from activity to activity. So you actually have to handle the gun, make it safe, put it down, leash your dog, go from there to another thing, take the leash off, pick up the gun, load it. It's a whole process. It's enough of a process, and I enjoyed it enough that I actually got myself a shotgun so that I could get better at it. Because my male dog is a little crazy. I didn't start him as a young puppy with this, so I really needed to be comfortable with the gun so that I could pay attention to my dog.
I find it to be very interesting. I mean, I know agility. I've been around that, and I've been around obedience. The hunt I have not been around. Now, I was thinking to myself, man, you'd have to be a really good shot if a duck is flying or a quail or whatever. I was like, man, you must be really good at accuracy. Kind of a little bit, kind of threw me a little off there. If you would have told me, yeah, I hit them all, I would have been like, man, you're amazing. So you could have lied to me and I would have believed it. Now, when they actually...
Sadly to say, they're already dead when you were doing that.
So they actually use actual real birds in the field.
They do.
Okay.
So they're not wild. They are, just like you have farms for cows. If you happen to eat meat, there are farms where you can go buy pheasants and ducks for this very purpose. To be honest, it's not something that the average Joe is terribly comfortable with, but it is what the sport is about. So you have to either be okay with that or you don't do hunt tests.
Well, when you're biologically appropriately raw feeders, you kind of understand that is part of the nature of the beast. So it's like I kind of, I don't personally eat meat, but my dog does. And I've said this so many millions of times. In this circumstance, I'm just thinking to myself, and as this type of feeder, I'm thinking, when the duck or quail, when they're done with it, what do they do? Because that would be great in a dog's food the whole time.
Well, not normally. When they're, again, it depends on the venue. In AKC, well, actually in nature, in AKC they actually do use something that they call a live flyer. So there is a live duck that not you, but somebody else is shooting. That's part of the process. In HRC, the bird is euthanized ahead of time. So to be perfectly honest, they don't go to waste. Most of them get taken home for training. So it's not like they're thrown in a big pile and horribly handled and trashed someplace. As trainers, we need to work with those types of things, because if your dog has never seen any of that till the day you show up at the hunt test, chances of them doing well with it are not great. So we actually, train with frozen birds.
And, it's weird because I don't really have any issue in this area, which probably might be a little mind-boggling to some people, but I understand hunting. I've never done it, but that's because I'm probably too much of a coward to do so, and I don't think I can shoot a gun well. But I understand that it's just part of pretty much the population. It has to be done. So I'm kind of like, I get that. I understand the science behind it. I have no issue whatsoever in that realm. And then again, the obedience and all of the training that's going into it. This is an absolute need for a lot of dogs. And I would imagine the preparation must be extensive to be able to teach them, okay, go and retrieve it, be able to sit, to stay. The loud pop of the gun, even though it's a popper, that's still a good sound for a dog. That's amplified by a lot. So
Right.
That's got to be hard to train a dog to be able to take that without jumping and having that anxiety to that sound.
Yeah, it is. The first dog, Sarah, that training was much different than what I'm doing now. She was what they call really vocal, so I really struggled a lot with that. All of the things that you described just would get her aroused even more.
Yeah.
So she was challenging. I didn't get as far with her in the levels for a variety of reasons, but that was one of them. And I didn't have a dog that had the same desire like she did until I got my second male dog, and I realized that he's kind of into this. So then I started training that. However, I started him late in the game also, so he has those same types of arousal issues, which I will always battle. You have sort of a small window when you first introduce them when they're young to help them be okay with all that and not get too high. And if you miss that window, if they have the tendency to be like that, you just have to deal with it. So that's where I am. I have 2 others that I train for that. They don't have the same type of arousal issues because, first of all, they're just completely different, and they've been exposed much earlier.
Now,
they're used to it, and I train differently now too.
Well, then that's always the first thing. You always look back and go, "Oh, if I would have known this when I started." Those little tricks of the trade. Now, is it better to have a male or a female?
I don't think it matters. It just depends on the background, the breeding of the dog. If you have either way, if you have an intact male or female, you have issues to deal with there. So sometimes that makes them harder to deal with. I think, people would say in general maybe that the females would be softer. However, my experience has been at hunt tests, that's not necessarily true. It just depends on their breeding. So it really doesn't matter. It's more of a personal preference. Gotcha.
And it's always interesting because demeanor has everything in the pretty much in the game. And I've never been able to call a female dog a bitch. I just can't stand that term. It bothers me. I've gone to different dog shows and I'll hear them just loosely say that. I'm like, I can't take that. So when you've never used it, I'm like, thank you, because I cringe. I don't know why, but I just hate that term. It's like, it's a female dog. Why? It does bother me.
The only reason that might make you change your mind is if you actually have a female dog that is actually like that. Then you go, oh yeah, I get it now.
I mean,
but it's still kind of a weird word.
It is. I have female dogs, and one is really picky, but I would still, I just could never do it. I don't know why that bothers me. Maybe next time you'll hear somebody say it, you're going to be like, I know somebody who hates that. And it bothers me. I don't know why.
Well,
but
until I started really getting into more, real dog shows, that was not anything I was familiar with. And I went to a few confirmation shows with one of my dogs, and I was very confused about the whole, okay, it's dogs, 6 to 12 months. And I'm like, what do you mean dogs? And then that's when I realized that's what they call the males.
Yeah.
They're bitches.
Which is funny, though, because it's like, man, that is some sex stuff going on right there.
I know.
And I get made fun of because I'm kind of a male sexist, or not male sexist. I can't even think of the term what I'm trying to go with here. Activist, pretty much. I'm always I'm trying to figure out where I'm going here. But I can't stand the demoralizing. I can't talk today. Demoralizing of women, and it's like it starts even now. I'm like, come on, folks. I mean, dog is a dog as long as it has its intact parts. Even if it's neutered, it's still a dog. But if it's a female, I don't know why that bothers me. I get so mad about it. I'm like, no, it's a female dog. Pet peeve number 163 of the day.
Everybody's got one.
Oh, I got plenty of them, especially when it comes into this realm. When I look at how dogs are treated and how dogs are put into different positions and just property, and all of this garbage, that I just feel like they're still alive. They still have feelings. They still are very much a main priority for all people. I mean, how we live without them is just impossible. And they need us, but we treat them like we would a frozen pizza. I think we may even treat frozen pizza better. Some people do. And that bothers me.
In my house, I have like 4 couches, and there's a dog on every one of them right now. So.
And that's our house. I mean, our dog, our Akita's like, ooh, bed, and wants to jump in our bed. And if she sleeps in our bed, it is the worst night of sleep for me. She's great to my wife, but she kicks me, she pushes me out. I think my dog just wants my side of the bed. But it's kind of funny. I mean, I can't think of going into someone's house and they would say down to their dog to not be on the couch or chair. I'm like, that's where it should be. I mean, why is that a bad thing? Again, I'm ranting.
Yeah.
pet peeve number 168 of the day, maybe. But so now let's go into the fact that you went into the next form of obedience, which is the whole agility. That can be, and as you said earlier, it can be kind of a drug. I mean, you've got all these different obstacles to train through, completely different than field test. I mean, you've got seesaws and these pillars to go around, little tubes to go through, and any little slight move, it's a point deduction. That had to be just tedious and a lot of work.
It is. And, you know, it's the same thing. It depends on the dog. If the dog loves it, the work doesn't seem as bad and it kind of goes better. So when I started doing it with Sarah, she loved it. You know, she was very vocal in the field work. She was not vocal in agility. She didn't bark. She didn't do any of the stuff that she did in the field because it was a different kind of arousal, but she still loved it. But that was back in the day when, you know, there were many more different kinds. I shouldn't say many more different kinds, but there weren't as many of the breeds that there are today. So, you know, you see a lot of border collies and shelties and dogs that are, you know, really kind of built fast and low to the ground. But when I started, sad to say, like 25 or more years ago, to be perfectly honest, it wasn't quite like that. So, you know, my dog was at one point like the fifth dog in, you know, front and finish for Labrador Retrievers or something at one point. And it wasn't because she was great. It was just because there weren't a lot of them, and it just was a different kind of process at that time. But right when I was getting out of it with her was when things were starting to change a little bit, where horses were getting tighter and faster, and they're not built for some breeds. Or you can have the dog do it, but it's not always the best thing for them. So, I did agility with Sarah. I did it also briefly with one of my dogs, another dog called Sydney. She didn't like it. She clearly didn't like it. I finally figured that out. Did it with another dog named Pippi, and that's how I met Debbie, because she had become injured. And then I had one other dog that I did it with, but I stopped doing agility when for a couple of reasons. My dog got injured, and I chose not to put her back out there once she was better. And they brought everything inside. So many of the trials now are just inside. They're in the big sports bubbles, or gyms or different places like that. And to me, part of the fun of it was like the hunt test. You were outside. Mm-hmm. And I preferred that. So I haven't done it in a few years now.
Yeah, the ambiance of being outside and seeing it in an outdoor environment would definitely be spoiled if you weren't inside. Because, you're on artificial turf and you're in artificial lighting. Yeah, I can see where that would bother me, too.
Yeah, the tone changes somewhat. At least I felt it did. There's some people that would not agree with that, which I understand. I think there's a little bit less of enjoying the day together with your dog mm-hmm. and with other people. Because we used to, you set up easy up tents, everybody, you'd bring food, you'd sit, you'd have your dog sitting in an X-pen or a crate sitting outside or, something like that. It was just different. It was an event, and you don't get that same feel inside, at least as far as I'm concerned. You don't. So, I was okay when I decided not to do it.
Well, when you look at it, dog show, showing dogs, that's inside. That's in the ring and all of those different environments. And that's okay. And that's probably the right place for it. Anything that has agility should be outside. And again, I can understand, and especially when you're part of the neck of the woods, my part of the neck of the woods, we don't always have the greatest weather, so in that case I can understand being inside, I guess. But a lot of these events happen a lot during spring and summer. It's not as much.
Well, I know, but the odd thing, you bring up weather. Some of my fondest memories of running agility are being at this outdoor place that was out in Rentham, Massachusetts. And I can remember in April running my dog with socks on my hands because it started to snow. It was in April, and there was some freak snowstorm, and we're out there running our dogs in the snow. And I didn't have winter clothes. It was April.
Right.
So, you found whatever you needed. But that's like an oddly fond memory I have of agility.
Those are
not top on the list.
But those are the fun ones because you're like, oh my god, I didn't expect it to happen, and it'll always stay in your mind as something fun to have been able to be part of. I don't know. I think outside, if you're not out there, what's the fun of it? And it kind of always reverts back to conversations I have a lot, and that is the way we in a sense mistreat dogs by not exercising them, not feeding them appropriately, is very much like the 90s. Growing up in that time and era where fast food was at its highest, anything that could go into a microwave was the most bought product out there in the stores, and we didn't care. And we always talked about video games are causing the youth to not go outside and play, where fast food is, making kids obese. And yet, it's the same thing with dogs now, 20 years later, and we're doing the same thing. And yet, here you are, you're like, no, we're out here, we're doing obedience, we're doing agility, we're doing field tests. And I'm like, no, that's exercise at its best. And yet, it's still not wide open for people to do. They're just like, my dog's at home, my dog's sleeping. That's where it likes to be. No, that's not what it's supposed to do. And I'm sure you hear it all the time. People who will get a working dog, and my dog has got so much energy, and I just don't have the time for it. Well, you picked the wrong dog.
Yeah. I know, and sometimes you kind of, got to be careful what you wish for. People get very involved in a hunt test or agility, so then they start looking for a dog that they feel that will excel, which makes perfect sense, except for it's not uncommon for those dogs to come with other things, like they do require more exercise. They might have more injuries because you're working them harder. You do have to, just handle them perhaps a little bit differently. And, agility isn't anything that the dog is born to do. So it is, regardless of what you're doing or how fast you're going or any of that, it's not a skill that they naturally have to begin with. So you do have to make sure you train it right and do things correctly. Otherwise, hurt yourself, you hurt your dog.
You say it perfectly, because when you think about it, they're not supposed to bob and weave, zig and zag. They're straight line. And that's what it would be.
Yeah.
Wild hunt. That was it. We're going through little tubes and up little things and down little things. And that must be very stressful on the body, which brings up that question. And this is where I'm starting to think a little bit like Debbie right now, but what kind of exercises do you do, or stretching do you do with your dogs before they go into these events?
Yeah, so back in the day when I did agility, we didn't do any of that stuff. For the most part, if they were crated, you took them out of the crate, you maybe walked them around a little bit, and you walked them up to the line, and you went. Now, at the time with that particular dog, Sarah, she had an enormous amount of energy. So I would take her out and walk her half an hour, play with her before it was my turn. That turns out was probably the right thing to do because it got muscles moving and warmed up. I did that out of self-preservation because otherwise she was like kind of crazy. But those are the types of things, even just a nice, 5-10 minute walk to get them moving and just get muscles warmed up, because all of those tasks, whether it's agility or hunt test, they're all sprints. There's nothing long term about it. It's not like, a 26, marathon where you've got that whole time. It's a sprint to the finish. It's 30 seconds if you're lucky for an agility, and then you're done.
Which I think is so funny, because I've been to different events and I've seen, there's the crate, open it up and go. It's like a plug and play. I always cringe because I'm like, I would never do that to my own daughter when we're getting ready for sports. It's like, okay, you're 9, you're still pretty limber, but you're getting to that age of 10 where everything starts to tighten up. So I'm starting to look at that going, okay, now we're going to have to start doing these pre-game kind of exercises to kind of warm it up. And I see this in dogs, I'm going, or even down to the fact that, well, I jog every day. I get up and they do the stretching, the humans do the stretching, but, the dog is sitting there, they put the leash on the dog, and they head out the door. No pre-warming up of the dog either. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just so dangerous.
I think right now, you would see a switch in that. I do think that people are much more aware of that. Not only sometimes you become aware of it because of your dog getting injured, and then you realize, or you just start. There's so many seminars and workshops and things like that you can go to, that some of them are specifically about, what do I need to do to condition my dog to do agility? What do I need, or what should I do to condition my dog to do this, or this? So I think there's less of that happening now, especially for people with dogs that are like really into it. Those are the dogs that are hard on their bodies. They don't pay attention. They just do, and then they think after. So I think there is a switch happening with that, and certainly folks like Debbie are big advocates of it, and they really are generous with their information and trying to share that, because, while dogs that are injured are what they deal with when they come in, they'd rather deal with just helping you condition your dog. They don't really want you to come in because your dog is hurt,
Right.
That's what they want. They'd rather have you come and condition your dog so they don't get hurt.
Now, what do you do at Wizard of Paws?
I'm doing mostly right now, I do their newsletter. So I do a lot on computer. That's what I did for many years when I worked for the insurance company. So I'm pretty familiar with that. And I've done newsletters for other venues as well. So I do her newsletter. I do some of her Facebook things. If you've ever seen her Facebook page, there's a dog there called Zoe Wizard. That's my dog. So when I'm bored, I put her hat on and make her do things and give her cookies.
I totally understand that.
She kind of likes it now. She can actually pretty much put anything on top of her head, and she just stays there because she's like, oh yeah, that's when I get cookies.
Well, Debbie needs to utilize you in more ways. I'm just saying that right now because I know she's listening. So that's just have to say that you got to utilize her more.
Well, she does. Yeah, I fill in for some of the girls there if somebody has to be out. But I have I have 6 dogs. Well, I had 6. I have 5 right now. We just lost one. So I kind of have my hands full here, and I'm kind of available on call for my mom, who's 87. So I bounce around a little bit. So whatever, I try to do the most that I can for her, stuff that I can do, either off hours or from home, if I need to. But she pulls me in. She'll be pulling me in on Friday after the big storm that's coming tonight.
Ugh, yikes. Well, yeah, it happens. All right, so let's go into starting 6 Black Dogs Leash Company. How did that idea come out? And because I know they're usually, the good ideas are spontaneous, that out of nowhere, and when you say them out loud, you're like, this is crazy, but they work. So how did this idea come out?
Hunt tests. So I found that the person that I started training with when I decided to get back into hunt tests had different pieces of equipment, and one of the things that she had was a lanyard that I really liked, and I said, that's a really nice lanyard that your whistle hangs off of. I said, where'd you get that? And she said, oh, da 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 da. And I went and I looked it up, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And I started looking at it, and I was like, I think I can make one of those. So, and I was kind of talking with her about it, and she said, I would totally buy more of these, and blah, blah, blah. So I started buying paracord and going onto YouTube, because you can learn absolutely everything you need to know in the world on YouTube.
Yes.
Hold on one. So I started looking into how to make the lanyards, how to make different styles. Then I decided, I've always been crafty. I was doing a bunch of stuff with polymer clay for a while. Again, still dog related. I like to just do things with my hands and crafty things. So, I just started making that stuff. And so the woman that I train with, is also a breeder. So she would tell people about my stuff, and then she uses all my leashes. She uses my lanyards. So people would see it, they should talk about it, and it sort of just went on from there. And at the time, I had 6 black dogs, and I was trying to figure out what to name it. And a friend of mine that I co-own one of the dogs said, "Oh, what about 6 black dogs leash?" And I was like, "Oh, I like that." So I took them outside and took a picture of all the 6, and there you have it. So that's kind of where it started. And I've been gradually over the last, it was kind of just so-so for the first year and a half. And this past year, I decided I was really going to try to make a better go of it, so that I could say it really is a business, not just a hobby. So I invested a bunch of money in magazine ads and things like that. So we're moving forward.
Well, paracord's hard to play with. I mean, I picked up a little bit of paracord because I was like, I'll try to make my own paracord leash and collar, and I couldn't even figure that out. I did the same thing you did. I went on YouTube and I was, playing with it, but apparently working with my hands just doesn't work. Everything has to be digital to me. The physical, yeah. I mean, IKEA and we do not get along. Even if it's a bookcase, we don't get along. I tried putting together a bookcase one time, and it turned out to be a fire pit. That's because that's where it ended up. So that's just me. But it really is hard to work with, and it's not like you have a product. It's not like, she's got one leash. You've got multiple different leashes, and I'm like, hunting combination, 3-foot monkey fist, which I was like, monkey fist. I was like, I don't even know what that term is. So I was like, I'm completely out of my element, which I like to be, because then I can ask questions and learn something from it. And I was like, man, you go 3 foot, you go 4 foot, you have the accessory cord slip, you have your heavy 2-foot snap, and you just continue to make different types to meet all the needs, which that's pretty cool.
Well, the odd thing about that is that at least 3 of those that you mentioned are ones that I created because somebody said, what do you a lot of times I'll take the stuff to the hunt test and I'll work on it I do it to keep me from eating. So, and somebody say, oh, what are you making? And I'll say such and such, and they'll say, oh, I've been looking for something like this. I had one of these and I can never find it again. So that's how the monkey knot fist came out, because somebody had a leash like that, couldn't find one anywhere, and he's like, I really want one of these. And I'm like, Larry, That's really hard to make, that monkey knot. It's a pain in the butt. Yeah, but I really want one. So it took me like 6 months, and then at that point, I still don't have it perfected. I will give the credit to my husband. He's got it down, so I do the whole leash, and then he does the monkey knot in the end. So I I did that because he was looking for it, and I've now put it on the website, and selling quite a few of them, actually. Same thing with the accessory cords, same thing. I ran into somebody at a hunt test, and she said, have you ever seen this material? I was like, no. But I went home and I researched it because she was a trainer. She trains other people's dogs. So I'm like, oh, that might be an opportunity, and I found the cord. I played around with how to use it and how to secure it. And you know what? She just sent me an email for a request for like another half a dozen. So a lot of those came from because somebody specifically asked for it. Because you can go on the internet and find paracord leashes. You can go, they're all kind of basically the same, but these are kind of, specific to a task. And I think that's the difference.
Yeah, I think that's, when I was looking through everything, I was like, okay, I've seen it on Amazon, I've seen it online, and I'm like, it's generic with the ones that you see on there. Not really, it's like the ones I was thinking about making for myself. Nothing that was going to stand out to be anything unique. It had no properties for field use. I'm looking at what you're doing, I'm like, well, this makes sense because what you're using them for is task. Now, apply that to the actual regular, just going around normal day, it would serve so much better than anything that's out there for the simple fact that it's durable and it's going to be able to hold up. Well, I don't think the other stuff can hold up because it's just not made to really withstand any kind of real pull, any kind of use. So I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And of course,
well, and the interesting thing is that some of them are almost venue specific. So
right.
When you do an HRC hunt test, you can use a slip lead, and partly you use a slip lead because when you get into the higher levels, you're dealing with a shotgun, so you have to be able to easily put the leash on the dog, go to the next place, take the leash off, do your thing. And you have to be able to put the leash away in your pocket. You have to get it out of the way because it's considered a training tool. AKC doesn't allow you to use slip. You have to use a regular snap bolt, or same thing, or when you get to the higher levels, you can't use the leash at all. So you have to be able to get the leash off and get it away. So they have to be able to, maybe a 4-foot leash, but it's got to be able to get up small and stuff in your pocket quickly. And then you got to be able to get it out quickly and use it. If you're a hunter, you don't want, a hot pink leash. You want, ammo or orange so you can find it when you lose it. That kind of stuff. So they do actually sort of fit the venue or fit the need. Quite a few of those were made because somebody said, oh, can you make this?
I think it's brilliant. I mean, I really do. I think it's brilliant. I mean, I wear my slip lead around my neck because, of course, working with dogs all day, I need to open up a kennel, and there it is. And I'll go to Starbucks or I'll go to the market, and it'll be around my neck like a stethoscope, and I don't even realize it's there. And my wife's like, you're wearing your slip lead. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. I mean, I have them in my car. I'm sure you have plenty in your car.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you how many times I'll be driving and it'll be a stray dog running around and it'll be freezing cold. I'm like, ooh, slip lead, and let's go save him. Happens quite a lot. So it's cool. What would you say is your most desired leash of all that everybody is just like, I can't get enough of?
Oddly enough, just the basic slip lead.
Really?
Nothing else on it. For the most part, people don't even want the leather slider. Yeah, especially for people who are at the higher level of trialing. In theory, they don't really need the leash. They want it to be comfortable. It needs to be, able to put in your hand easily. They don't want it really long. They don't want stuff hanging off of it. You don't want anything that's going to catch on things. I sell a lot of just the basic slip and lanyards, just a single swivel hook lanyard.
That
And
shocks me.
the feedback that I've gotten is the reason people like it is because they're just basic. They're simple. There's nothing fancy. There's nothing to catch on things. They just work.
Huh.
That's, it's like what people sometimes say why they use iPhones instead of another venue, because you take it out of the box and it works.
Plug and play. Gotcha.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not on an iPhone. I like them, but it's just not my choice of phones to use. But
Yep.
my wife likes hers. I love the apps that are on there. Siri works great, so I'm like, hey, that does work. But I get it. I totally understand. I would have expected something that would have been like, oh, there's this technical, and I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
No, and that's the feedback I've gotten from people, or the reviews is like, perfect. It's what I was looking for. It's simple. It does its job. It's all they wanted. Just
utility. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
It shocks me. I always expect some wild answer to come up out of that. So,
and I played around a lot with some fancy stuff, and it didn't sell. So I've got some of that stuff just as part of my generic leash category on my website. It's still sitting there, because it doesn't fit the basic purpose. If you're doing competition obedience, my stuff isn't really quite what they're looking for. I mean, I have sold some for that, and I have used it for that, but not a lot. Vet techs, field people, hunting people, daycares, dog trainers, especially slip leads, like with an extra, either snap bolts, but with an extra O-ring that you can then turn into a slip really quickly. That kind of stuff. Utilitarian, like you said.
Yeah.
Boom, boom.
Boy, I like something that has multiple layers to it. I'm one of those types of people, so I was expecting something so massive, like you were going to say this triple bolt, triple monkey fist type knot. I was like, okay, I'm waiting for this big thing, and I was like, okay, all right. Well, hey, I mean, if it works, it works. Don't mess with perfection. I guess reinventing the wheel is pointless, but people still try.
Yeah, I mean, well, my husband says it all the time. He says it's not about, because I'll say, well, I really like making these, but ultimately, it's really not about that. It's
right.
about what somebody wants and what they want to buy. So, it doesn't really matter if I like making it or not. And then there are some things that I made that I hated making, and I only sold like one of them. So
you're like, yes!
Exactly. Because I would almost dread every time I got an order, oh God, please don't let it be that. So I finally just eliminated my stress, and I just took it off the website.
So what's next? Are you going to do any kind of DVDs? Because I know Debbie's done a few, but I'm thinking, that would be kind of fun. Some maybe utility kind of sports agility type thing, or even hunt test. Or you think about going into that, idea, other kinds of product. What do you think is in the future for you?
My first thing is for 2018 is I need to make sure that I've got myself advertised appropriately. Again, as much as I hate writing the checks, it's definitely paid off. And there's a couple other, working dog type magazines that I want to get myself into. I actually need to, it sounds kind of odd, but I need to kind of look at my price ranges, because I started off kind of low, and I've been gradually changing that a little bit. And there's one leash that I'm working on now. I just started it this week that I want to start to offer, which is still a slip lead, but a wider slip lead that's a little bit more, has a little bit more substance to it, but it still needs to be able to, fold up and be small and compact. I haven't branched out too much more as far as other new things. It's just that weird thing. You thinks it's a really cool idea, you go through it, you push it, you make it, you get it out there, and it sits there like a big lump. So you don't know till you try. And honestly, most of the new stuff, like I said before, it's because somebody asked for it.
Right.
So it's almost better that way, because now you go, oh, somebody is looking for that. And they'll say, oh, can you do this? Like there's a combo chain and paracord leash on my site. Mm-hmm. That was somebody who called and said, I'm trying to find one of these. And she sent me a picture. She goes, I want this, but I want it on this. And I said, oh, yeah, I could probably do that. Let me mess around with it and send it to you. Well, she goes, oh, that would be great, because I know like a whole bunch of people that really want one. Well, I've gotten 4 other orders since then for that. So it's that kind of thing. So sometimes I ask people, like, well, what would you want? The woman that I do training with is also hunts. So that whole combination leash is something that I had come up with for her, because she doesn't want a collar on her dog, but she wants to be able to have some type of control over the dog while she's getting from A to B, but then be able to quickly get rid of it. So I have to ask more questions about people. What would you like today?
Sometimes it helps. Sometimes the feedback helps. Sometimes you find out that you really don't get a good answer. But, for the most part, feedback is I guess, the only thing that we can really decide what we're doing right and what we're failing at. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and actually, I just realized that I have a whole pattern downstairs for shotgun straps.
Hey, there you go.
That was my next adventure. So, but I just haven't started it yet, which is why I didn't think of it.
Well, now that the holiday season is past us, there's just nothing to look forward to except for making new stuff. I can't sit and watch TV. If TV's on, I'm doing something along with it, so I'm pretty sure you're the same way. I just can't turn off. It's kind of sad.
Yeah, my husband calls it passive watching. It drives him crazy. But yeah, that's what I do. I usually watch Netflix while I'm doing stuff. I have a whole workroom set up in the basement, so I have Netflix going on my laptop while I'm doing stuff. The dogs are all laying around.
I can understand that. That Netflix, it really does get under my skin on how much I'm addicted to watching whatever on. There's so many different things that you can't. Oh my gosh, I've seen so many shows through and I'm like, oh boy. But it's fun. Well, is there anything that we didn't cover that we really should be talking about that I missed?
I don't think so. I mean, as far as my activities, I think the things that I have found to do with my dogs have sort of generated the things that I like to do with my hands. So it's kind of worked out that way. I haven't figured out how to work tracking into paracord yet, so that's the only thing still working through.
I would think that would actually be a possibility, because it is a utility and you need it. So I think it depends on
really long piece, though.
Yeah,
that becomes more of a just how do you manage it kind of thing, because you have to have it has to be at least 20 feet long for your tracking leash, I think, or something like that. So that's a lot of paracord.
Oh yeah. You get a big long thing of paracord and it just makes a keychain. You're like, that's it? At least when I made it, it's like.
Well, and it's more trying to manage the paracord while you're trying to feed it.
Yes, and then you'll see one spot that's up a little bit that you missed, and you have to go and pull everything out just to fix that one imperfection. Yeah, that was my big thing, because I would see an imperfection like, it's like 20 different levels up. I have to go back and fix that, so that means I have to take down every one. Yeah, that was hard for me. But yeah, I mean, I would imagine to have that much footage would definitely take time, and that'd be rough. But it's utility though, so I can see where it would work.
It is. I haven't totally taken it off the list. I just have to, try to determine whether the amount of effort put into it is worth it, because the paracord in itself isn't expensive. It's the time, it's the labor.
Yes.
That's where everything goes. And, that's not something you can easily price.
No, you can't. That's the hard part about the whole thing with anything, whether it's
right.
information that you're selling or it's product. You really have to figure out what your time is worth to actually accurately charge. It can be hard.
Right.
Well,
yeah, I'm not very good at that either.
Yeah, no, it's the taking the money part that's always my problem. I always feel guilty. I don't know. You always worry. Can you afford it? Can you? That's my thought process. Well, Penny, it has been a pleasure, and I really appreciate you being on the podcast. It's been intelligent conversation that I didn't know a lot of different things that I'm really, really grateful I was able to sit down and talk to you.
Great. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to share, and it's kind of an interesting awakening for me, actually, to kind of say, hey, you know what? I actually done quite a bit.
You have.
A lot of information.
And that's the funny part is before we even, went through this process, Penny was saying, I don't know if I have enough content to really talk and do an episode. I'm like, I guarantee you do. Everybody has a great story. It's just being able to find that story and talk it through. And
yeah.
Almost an hour into it, and look at, you got a whole story in, and you got tons of different experiences. I knew about regular obedience, I knew about agility, but I didn't know anything about hunt. So that was...
You should go watch hunt someday. It's quite fascinating, actually.
I would like to. I'm going to actually look into that because I don't really do the dog shows. I'll go just to be able to see the elegant dogs. I love watching agility because, boy, they're so amazing. Just the time and effort.
Yeah.
But I've never seen a hunt test, and I definitely want to see that. That's cool.
Yeah, you should check it out. It certainly doesn't have the same level of excitement necessarily that agility does, but you can really see a dog doing kind of what instinctively they were bred to do. So I think that's the cool thing about that whole venue.
That's what intrigues me. Well, that's this episode of the podcast. Have a pet-tastic week, everybody. Bye-bye.
Okay, gotta go in my bedtime.